أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to session number 10 of FIQ'H UN NISA. And today we are going to discuss a critically important topic. Honestly, I did not realize myself till I researched this topic. Walaikum assalam, Hawa. That this is, that it is so critically important. Believe me, I have been teaching Quran, I have been researching different topics, but this was the first time that I researched the laws of inheritance in such depth. I mean, when you are teaching Surah Nisa, Surah Al Baqarah, we go over these rules, we go over these principles. And recently, the Quran course that I'm teaching went over the ayat-e-miras, as they are called, the verses of inheritance in Surah Nisa. And even then, I discovered so many deficiencies that I had, because the Quran is such a miraculous text that every time you go over it, you learn something new. You develop a new part of your brain, so to say. And recently, having done Surah Nisa, when I researched again for this session, let me tell you, my knowledge, and it's not even knowledge, my understanding of inheritance increased. I think it doubled when I reviewed the same verses, when I reviewed the same lessons. Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to be able to share this knowledge. And I hope and I pray that all of you will research it for yourselves as well, for your families, for your loved ones, and that this knowledge must not stop here. So let me just go to the session that I prepared. All right. Okay. Now, and since I was preparing it from the woman's standpoint, the thing is, let me just make it clear in the beginning, because this was the original title, so I kept it. But the Islamic law of inheritance is not specifically for women. It is for Muslims. It is for believing Muslims. And it is, Hadith says, Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to recite the Hadith in front of you, but the essence is that the knowledge of inheritance is actually all the knowledge, and all the other rules and principles and all the other orders in Islam are sort of subject to the knowledge of inheritance. So, and the knowledge of inheritance, I have included two slides in the end just to introduce the topic, that the knowledge of the laws of inheritance gave rise to an extensive science like algebra. I was totally surprised today, because when I'm doing my research, I sort of click all the links and I see what is written there. And this is something I found on Wikipedia, and then I checked it, and it is genuine knowledge. So I mean, a subject like algebra was deduced from Islamic law of inheritance by Al-Khwarizmi. I hope I'm saying the name right. Anyway, on to session number 10 of FIQ'H UN NISA, which is the Islamic law of inheritance. From a woman's standpoint, but this is something that needs to be known and taught and understood by every Muslim around us. The objectives of this session are to correlate the controversies in the Islamic law of inheritance as applied to women with prevalent misinterpretations. Because as I go over the different points in the session, I'm going to also highlight for you the controversies that we have made. I mean, it is not that there is a controversy in the Quran, or there's a controversy in the knowledge of the subject of inheritance, but there is a lot of controversy in our interpretation and especially in our application of that knowledge. Unfortunately, we do not have a law that is the Sharia law. Although most decisions regarding inheritance are done according to Sharia law because there is no other better law. In UK, even in USA, and now in many other non-Muslim countries, there are special categories of law that are applied to Muslims because the Muslim law of inheritance is very unique, and the decision making becomes very easy when that law is applied to decisions regarding inheritance. Then, to discuss and review the verses about making a will in Surah Al Baqarah, and discuss and review the verses about inheritance, the law of inheritance, like I told you, the ayat-e miras in Surah Nisa. So Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Nisa are basically the main two surahs, in which this law is revealed, and you will be surprised to see that such an extensive law and such a diverse decision making is all encapsulated. I mean, it is like um, it's like an infinite subject is just enclosed so beautifully in these verses and taught to the Muslims for their own betterment. Now, before I begin, it is very important to know that the decision making regarding inheritance is extremely, extremely, extremely critical. It is something that must not be taken lightly because inheritance is something that is critical in a society. If a society is healthy, if the courts are working, if people are honest, and if everybody is given their due right, then that society will be an ideal society where people can live in peace and harmony and happiness, and they can enjoy a good life, and they can even worship, and they can give everybody their due rights in peace. In societies where such good things do not exist are societies where people are not given their basic rights. An inheritance is a basic human right according to the Quran. So violation of inheritance, and we know this from the Quran and from Hadith, from Sunnah, that violation of inheritance is a reason to end up in hell, to end up in Jahannam, and one has to be very, very careful. I mean, if somebody has lived a perfect life, somebody has been a good Muslim, somebody has practiced according to what Islam asks us to do, and that person dies, and the matters of inheritance cannot be settled according to Islam, or one of the heirs, or two or three, or however many heirs do not get their due rights, this person, unfortunately, will not be successful in the hereafter. So, this is a very scary aspect that needs to be very carefully dealt with. So, as soon as a Muslim dies, what are the main four duties that need to be performed immediately? Number one is pay funeral and burial expenses. So, whoever dies, if I die, I have to leave a certain amount and say that this is to go to towards my funeral and burial expenses. That is the best way. Or sometimes families have a fund. Each family pays some amount monthly in a fund, which is a very small amount. Supposing there are, sorry, supposing there are 4 brothers and sisters or 7 brothers and sisters, and they make a fund and they pay an amount every month in that fund till one of them or one of the family members needs funeral and burial expenses, and then it is paid through that fund. And I have seen those funds, they work very well, and they are an excellent way of remembering one's ending, one's death, because as Muslims, we must always remember that this life is temporary, it is going to end, and that we are responsible to face the hereafter. The second is, as soon as a person dies, paying the debts of the deceased, even before the news of death is shared. Unfortunately, in our society, even before the family is able to come back from the hospital, the news has spread, and there is a there is a confusion, and there are phone calls, and people are coming in, and there's a big matter of receiving people and helping them settle down before such important things can be done. But even before the news of death is shared, even before people are informed that such and such person has died, it is important that their debts are settled. So this is something that nobody wants their loved ones to leave the world with a debt that they are facing. It is better to turn your videos off, please, because the session is being recorded. Okay, so then determine the value of or the will of the deceased, which is capped to 1/3 of the estate. Now, 1/3, a person can make a will in 1/3 of his inheritance. This is in our Sharia. And there is a hadith about it. I will share it with you. This is not in the Quran, but there is a very solid reason for our muftis and our scholars for making this rule. If a person is writing a will which is to be executed after the person dies, then that will has to be limited to 1/3 of the wealth. There is a strong lobby of scholars, of Islamic scholars, that we really respect, who do not agree with this. And I will explain the reasons for that as well. But the current Islamic Sharia, the schools that we have, the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Hanbali, and Maliki, and then Ahl Tashri. The Ahl Tashri, the Shia schools are somewhat different, but they also say that a will can be made in 1/3 of the estate that the person is leaving behind, and no more than 1/3. Now, the reason in favor of that is that nobody should be violating the rights of their rightful heirs by making a will. Supposing I say that when I die, all my, whatever I'm leaving behind is going to go to an orphanage when I have 2 kids. So technically, I did not leave anything to my children. I did not leave anything to my husband. I did not leave anything to my parents if they are alive. Better to turn your videos off, please, because the session is being recorded. So I will I will actually be violating the rights of my rightful heirs if I make the entire will in favor of somebody who's not my legal heir. That is the argument in favor of this. The argument against this is that there is no such thing in the Quran. The Quran does not limit, or the Quran does not cap how much I can will to somebody after I die. So here I've given you both sides of the story, and both are valid. And both are supported by very strong groups of scholars. But the important thing is, yes, Habiba, the rule applies to both the genders. The rule applies to men and women as well. Okay, number 4 is distribute the remainder of estate and property to the relatives according to the Sharia law. And we're going to read the verses that form the basis of this Sharia law. Sorry. Okay. Now here is Al-Baqarah 180. This is the verse that makes making a will a farz. It is mandatory. Kutiba alaykum. Because see, kutiba alaykum siyam. So it is mandatory upon you. It is written upon you to fast. Same thing comes in the Quran. Here in Al-Baqarah 180, Allah says, kutiba alaykum. It is prescribed for you, it is mandatory for you. إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتُ. When death approaches any one of you, إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّةِ, so that they make a will in their wealth. Khair here, taraka khair is whatever wealth you are leaving. Wasiya is the last will and testament. In English, simply we can say the last will and testament. Lil walidaini, in favor of their parents, wal aqrabina, and their immediate family, bil maruf, fairly. Bil Maruf actually means according to the prescribed customs of the society or the laws of the society in which they are living. Haqqan alal muttaqeen. This is obligatory upon the pious ones. Now, one school of our scholars says that these verses, the verses for making a will in Al-Baqarah, came when there was no law of inheritance, when Surah Nisa was not yet revealed, and Muslims were told to make wasiyah. And since Surah Nisa was revealed and the Ayat-e-Miras were revealed, these verses are now cancelled by those verses. That is one school of thought. I'm telling you of what major scholars and mufassirin of the Quran have said. Another school says that the words used in this verse are simply too strong. Kutiba, haqqan. This is a verse that does not look like it is abrogated or it is cancelled. There is, each Muslim, each one of us who is a believing Muslim has a duty to write a will and testament. And this is proven from a hadith. Prophet ﷺ has instructed Muslims to write their wills. Umar Raziallahu Ta'ala instructed Muslims to write their wills. Ali Raziallahu Ta'ala is known to have repeatedly told believing Muslims, to not spend 3 nights in succession without writing a will about any possession that they may have at that time. So, personally speaking, I mean, I'm not a scholar, but I don't believe that this verse is cancelled. I am from the school that believes that writing a will is mandatory for every Muslim, and that a will should be written. And in the end, I will also tell you, how to write a will. What are the steps in writing a will? It's simply to just write all your possessions and where do you want them to go. Now, I told you in Sharia, we are told to write our will only in 1/3 of our wealth, so that we are not violating the rights of the rightful heirs. Since we are, we don't want to violate their rights, automatically another order in Sharia is that the will cannot be written in favor of the heirs. I hope I'm making myself clear. Number one, the will is to be written in 1/3 of the wealth. And I explained the reasons for that. Number two, a rightful heir cannot be part of the will. If I'm a daughter, if I'm a son, if I'm a sister, a brother who is going to inherit anyways, I cannot be a part of a will. Right? I hope all of us understand this point. Now, again, this point is heavily contested. There is an arm of a school of scholars who say that yes, will should not be made in favor of a rightful heir, because this will violate the rights of other heirs. Other heirs will be getting less than this one heir who is in the will. Agreed, 100%. I mean, I'm not a scholar. I think they have spent their lives to earn the right to give this advice. The other school says that since Quran does not say that a will cannot be made in favor of heirs, of course a will can be made in favor of heirs if there are in principle reasons, if such reasons exist. And those reasons are two. One is that one heir is exceptionally poor compared to others, which is not very well taken, which is not very well accepted. And the second reason is that one heir has taken care of the person who's dying for a long time. and the person who's dying wants to pay that person for the care that they received or for the services that they received, just like he would pay a medical person or a nurse or somebody who took care of them. So these two reasons, I'm sorry, let me just, somebody messaged. Obvious, any other issue should be mentioned. This is, yes. I will go over part of the part that you mentioned, Habiba. Thank you. Thank you for asking. It's a very important question. So here, I have taught you, I mean, this was my responsibility. Al-Baqarah 180 is the verse that mandates it upon every Muslim, every sane Muslim who has a working mind to write a will. And I told you the rules of the will according to our Sharia. And the reason to know the rules so well and in depth is because if a will violates those rules, then it can be challenged in a court of law, in a Sharia court, as well as a regular civil court. So make sure, number one, that the will is written. Number two, if you don't want, controversy in the will, write it in 1/3 of your wealth. And number three, if you don't want controversy in the will, write it in favor of non-heirs. Write it in favor of people who are not your heirs. These three things, just remember this, okay? And I told you each and every point, for and against, pros and cons of every point. Okay. Then it is important to have witnesses when a will is executed. فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَ مَا سَمِعَهُ. Whoever changes the will after they heard it. So this does not mean that a written will, I mean, in those times, a written will maybe was not possible for everyone. So they would tell people that this is what I want. And even now, people come in and say that this is what I heard. This is what the person told me before they died. So Quran says, whoever changes the will after hearing it, the blame will be only on those who made the change. This is very important to know. The Quran has made provisions for all kinds of will. It is extremely important. It is extremely important to make sure, Lubna, your camera is on. Since the session is recorded, you may not want the camera to stay on. Zubina, your camera is also on. Okay. And then, so whoever changes the will, then it is not upon the deceased. The sin is not upon the deceased, but rather on the person who changed the will. In Allah Sami'un Alim, of course, Allah is all hearing and all knowing. And then, فَمَنْ خَافَ مِنْ مُوسِ جَنَفًا. Now, here is the point. Like I mentioned for you, this is why we have the fatwa from the scholars. Whoever suspects an error or an injustice in the will and brings about a fair settlement among the parties will not be sinful. So if somebody has violated the rightful rights of an heir in his or her will, then whoever is executing the will has the right to change it. Both. And I've labeled them in red and green. This is good and this is bad. Now here is verse number 240. And this is in favor of widows, because the inheritance of widows is, I think we will need 3 separate sessions to discuss the inheritance of widows. Those of you who die leaving widows behind should bequeath for them a year's maintenance without forcing them out. وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ مَتَاعًا إِلَى الْحَوْلِ. And this verse is interpreted in 2 ways. And I want you to know both the ways in which it is interpreted. The people among you who die, who pass away and they leave wives, they need to make a will for those wives. مَتَاعًا إِلَى الْحَوْلِ غَيْرَ إِخْرَاجٍ. For sustenance for them for 1 year without turning them out. So in the society in which the verse is being revealed, probably widows were turned out immediately. or widows did not have any inheritance. So Quran says that make a will for your widows for at least 1 year, and they will not be turned out if they don't want to leave. Okay. Another interpretation is make a will in favor of your women, make a will in favor of your wives, and give them sustenance for 1 year without turning them out. Because one school says that making a will in favor of the wife is not permissible in Islam. She will inherit what is given to them according to the law of inheritance, according to Qanun Sharia. Another school says that a husband gives something to the wife in his life. It is completely permissible because after the husband passes, and if supposing they don't have children, the share that the woman receives is very small. And again, I am just giving you the points of view. I'm not giving you an interpretation. I'm not qualified to do that. فَإِنْ خَرَجْنَا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ. And if they leave, supposing the woman decides to remarry, or she moves away, she goes back to her parents. If she goes away before that 1 year, then it is not a sin upon you. فِيمَا فَعَلْنَ فِي أَنفُسِهِنَّ مِنْ مَعْرُوفٍ. Whatever they do, whatever they decide for themselves, in a decent way. Bil ma'ruf. That bil ma'ruf is very important. Something that is recognized as decent in the society, something that is according to the customs of the society. Wallahu azizun hakim, and Allah is almighty and all wise. So this was about the widows. Here is Surah Nisa. وَلِكُلِّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِي. And we have appointed heirs. We have appointed heirs. مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. Whatever is left behind by the parents and the next of kin. A qaraba is somebody that is close to me, is a close relative. My uncles, my aunties, my first cousins. As for those who have made a pledge to, وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, you have made a pledge to give them their share. Supposing you are in a financial contract, supposing you have a bank loan, surely فَأْتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ, and you will give them their share as well. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدًا. And Allah is a witness over all things. This is the first ayat-e-miras in Surah Nisa, verse number 33. Okay. Then Surah Al-Ma'idah, 105. This is about will again. This is still about will. This is not the exact law of inheritance, the Qanun-e-Wirasat. Those ayat are coming. Those ayat are not here yet. The reason I'm giving you the ayat about will is to share my opinion as well, sort of, maybe push my agenda, that making a will is not obsolete in Islam. If we think that making a will is obsolete in Islam, that is something that needs to be addressed. It is not obsolete. Now, this is about the actual procedure of writing a will. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu shahadatu bainakum, O believers, make witnesses among you, iza hazara ahadakumul mautu hinal wasiyat. When one of you is facing your death at the time of making a will, asnani zawa adlim minkum, two, wise men among you, somebody who you know and who is a good witness, two just men among you, which means Muslim. Aw akharani min ghayrikum, otherwise two non-Muslims. If you don't have Muslims available, like it was very common in that society, in antum zarabtum fil ardi, if you are traveling, fa asabatkum musibatul maut, and you face the calamity of death, tahbisunahuma min ba'di salat, and you keep them after the prayer. So these witnesses, and this is an actual happening in prophetic times, those witnesses were brought to Masjid Nabawi, and they were presented to everybody there after the prayer. فَيُقْسِمَانِ بِاللَّهِ. So they bear testimony. They testify under oath. In artabtum la nashtari bihi samanan, so that they would never sell their testimony for any price. Walau kana za qurba, even if even if it's a close relative who will be affected by their testimony. So they have to bear witness and be under oath when they describe that will that was made to them by the person who passed away. Wala naktumu shahadatallahi. And you will not hide a testimony for Allah. Inna izalla min al asimin, and in that case we should, and in that case we surely would be. Wala naktumu, and we will not hide a testimony that in Allah's name, and if we do so, then we are sinful. This is Surah Maida, verse number 105, and I am giving it here to stress upon the importance of making a will. The law of inheritance is automatic, but making a will is our responsibility. Now, like I said, the beneficiary of the will or their spouse cannot act as a witness. This is something that is in our law, that is in US law, that is in Indian law. And it makes sense, such a witness has to be impartial, cannot be partial. And then again in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah says, if the witnesses are found guilty of false testimony, let the deceased two closest heirs affected by the bequest replace the witnesses and testify under oath. So supposing a person dies and he made a will in front of two witnesses who are now subjected to scrutiny, and the, the will that they describe somehow violates the rights of the heirs. The will is not fair, for example. In that case, two people who are close to the person who died will stand up and they will swear, they will get under oath, and they will say that our testimony is truer than theirs. فَيُقْسِمَانِ بِاللَّهِ لَشَهَادَتُنَا أَحَقُّ min shahadatihima, that their two testimonies are truer compared to the testimonies of these witnesses. Wama atadaina inna, and that we are not transgressing, we are not being unfair. Inna izalla min az-zalimin, and if we transgress, then we would surely be the wrongdoers. This entire subject is, the detail is about making a will when one is traveling, or making a will, in front of witnesses who are not related to the person who died. And the reason I included it here once again is the importance of making a will in front of two witnesses. So in this way, after explaining the entire, procedure of making this kind of a will in front of witnesses, Allah says, in this way, it is more likely that the witnesses will give true testimony, or else fear that their oaths will be refuted by those of the heirs. Be mindful of Allah and obey, for Allah does not guide the rebellious people. Here is the hadith. This is the book of Wasiya, Kitabul Wasiya, the book of wills and testaments, 2742. The reference is from Sahih al-Bukhari. Prophet says that, came to me and I was sick. This is Amir, the sub-narrator, sorry. The Sahabi in this story is Umar bin As, I think. I hope that Raziyallahu ta'ala anhu, I hope I remember his name. The Prophet said, may Allah bestow his mercy on Ibn Afra, Saad bin Khawla. I said, so this is not Umar bin Alas, this is somebody else. Oh Allah's messenger, may I will all my property in charity? He said, no. I said, then may I will half of it? He said, no. I said 1/3. He said, yes, 1/3. Even 1/3 is too much. It is better for you to leave your inheritors wealthy than to leave them poor begging others. And whatever you spend for Allah's sake will be considered as a charitable deed, even the handful of food you put in your wife's mouth. Allah may lengthen your age so that some people may benefit by you and some others be harmed by you. At that time, Saad had only one daughter. Now, this is the hadith. And again, there are two schools. One says that this is an individualized ruling that Prophet ﷺ gave to somebody who had a daughter and who was asking to give all his wealth away in charity. And Prophet ﷺ said that no, you have to leave it to your heirs. The other school says that the decision to write the will only in 1/3 of one's inheritance is based on this hadith. This is a Sahih hadith. It is well researched. This is true, and this is where the rule in Sharia comes from. So there I read it for you, and it is open for discussion. Now the ayat-e miras. This is Surah Nisa, verse number 11. Yusikumullahu fi awladikum. Allah commands, Allah is making a wasiyah. Allah is making a final will and testament to you about your children. Awladikum. Lizzakari mislu hazzal unsayen. The basic principle of inheritance is the share of the male will be twice that of female. Just remember that. فَإِن كُنَّ نِسَاءَ فَوْقَ اثْنَتَيْنِ. If you leave only 2 or more females, their share is 2/3 of the estate. If the women are more than 2, then for them is ثُلُثًا مَا تَرَكَ. وَإِن كَانَتْ وَاحِدَةً. And if there is only one female, her share will be 1/2. فَلَهَا النِّصْفُ. وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ. Each parent. So if somebody dies and the parents are alive. وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ. For the parents, each one, if mother and father both are alive, each one will get 1/6. If you leave, in kana lahu waladun. If the person who died left children, if he had children and his parents were alive, then the parents are entitled to 1/6 each. Okay? فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ. And then if he did or she did not have children, وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ. And his sole heirs are his parents. فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. Then your mother will receive 1/3. فَإِن كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ. And if he had brothers, didn't have children, but he had brothers, then the mother will again receive 1/6 and the rest will go to the brothers. مِن بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةٍ يُوصِي بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ. After the will is fulfilled and the debts are paid. آباؤكم وأبناؤكم. Be fair to your parents and children. آباؤكم وأبناؤكم, your parents and your children. لا تدرون, you don't know. أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. Who is closer to you in benefit? Who is more beneficial for you? فريضة من الله. This is farz from Allah. إن الله كان عليما حكيما. Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. The first. And this verse was a revolution in that society at the time where women had no rights. So for the first time, inheritance was given to women. That is one big, historic hallmark of this verse. But also, it gives a comprehensive division of inheritance among rightful heirs. وَلَكُمْ نِصْفُ مَا تَرَكَ أَزْوَاجُكُمْ. And you will inherit half of what your wives leave behind. إِلَّمْ يَكُنْ لَهُنَّ وَلَدٌ. If they do not have children. Now, this is not the children between the husband and wife. These children may come from a previous marriage also. If the woman had children from a previous marriage, فَإِنْ كَانَ لَهُنَّ وَلَدٌ, if she has children, فَلَكُمُ الرُّبْعُ مِمَّا تَرَكْنَ, then only 1/4 for you from what she has left. No children, the husband will get half. Yes, children, even from another husband, the husband will get 1/4. مِنْ بَعْدِ وَصِيَّةٍ يُوصِينَ بِهَا أَوْ دَيْنٍ, after the fulfillment of the will and payment of debts. وَلَهُنَّ الرُّبْعُ مِمَّا تَرَكْتُمْ, and for them is 1/4 out of what you left. إِلَّمْ يَكُنْ لَكُمْ وَلَدٌ, if you did not have children with her. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَكُمْ وَلَدٌ, and then if you had children, فَلَهُنَّ الثُّمُنُ مِمَّا تَرَكْتُمْ, then it is 1/8 for them out of what you left. So if there were children, the share of the woman goes down. And this has been a point of major controversy um, all over the world, wherever this is discussed, that a woman with children is being given less. And it has, it has an entire juristic basis. It has an entire Quranic and Islamic history related basis. A woman has the right to remarry, receive a dower, have another life, and children, they will inherit from their father if they are there. من بعد وصية توصون بها أو دين, after the will is fulfilled and the loans are paid. وإن كان رجل يورث كلالة. Now this is a special case. That if a man or a woman leaves neither parents nor children, but only a brother or a sister. Kalala means parents are not alive and the person who died, the kalala, never had children or does not have living children at the time. Awimra'atun, or his wife, walahu akhun aw ukhtun. So a person died issueless, the parents have already passed, the wife has already passed, or the person never married. But this person has brother or sister. فَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ. So each of the brother and sister is going to receive the 6th part of inheritance. فَإِنْ كَانُوا أَكْثَرَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. If there's not just one brother or sister, there are more than that. 2 brothers and 3 sisters, or 5 siblings. فَهُمْ شُرَكَاءُ فِي الثُّلُثِ. Then they are partners in 1/3 of the property. من بعد وصية يوصى بها أو دين غير مضار. After the will is fulfilled and the loans are paid, and without any harm to the heirs. This is very important. Without harm to the heirs. This. Without harm to the heirs means that the will cannot actually harm the heirs. Wasiyatam min Allah. This is a wasiya. This is a final will and testament from Allah. Wallahu alimun halim. And Allah is all-knowing and He's most forbearing. So this is An-Nisa, verse number 12, which sort of completes the Islamic Sharia, or the Islamic Qanun-e-Wirasat, as we say. Towards the end of An-Nisa, Allah again goes over the case of Kalala, which means somebody who died issueless, does not have parents, does not have a wife. They ask you for a ruling, O Prophet ﷺ, about Kalala. يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِي كَلَالَ. Allah is going to give you a fatwa. Allah is going to give you a ruling regarding those who died without children or parents. If a man dies childless and leaves behind a sister, she will inherit 1/2 of his estate, whereas a brother will inherit all of her estate if she dies childless. If this person leaves behind 2 sisters, they together will inherit 2/3 of the estate. But if the deceased leaves male and female siblings, a male's share will be equal to that of 2 females. Allah makes this clear to you so that you do not go astray. And Allah has perfect knowledge. Wallahu bikulli shay'in alim. Allah has perfect knowledge of all things. Now, it is very important to have a concept of who is an heir. Who is an Islamic heir? First is quota heirs. These are, the mandatory. The female are wife, daughter, granddaughter, mother, grandmother, full sister, paternal sister, maternal sister. And the male heirs are husband, paternal grandfather, maternal brother. These are the male heirs. Okay. Then members of the asaba, which means that they are from the same clan. They are close, usually a combination of male and female that inherit as residuaries after the shares of the quota is distributed. So quota heirs are number one. If the entire property, the entire inheritance is exhausted in quota heirs, then members of the asaba are obviously will not get anything. But if the inheritance is such that it is divided among the quota heirs and then it is left, the more property, more amount is left behind, then asaba, the other relatives will receive that part. And finally are the extended family members. These include any blood relative who's not a quota heir or asaba. Examples is maternal grandfather, aunts, nieces, and female cousins. Okay. The process of inheritance is very simple. All quota heirs are allocated their part, and if it exhausts the property, that's it. Very good. Otherwise, go to the next step. Residually heirs get the remainder of the property, and it is divided among them according to the same rule that a woman will receive half or a male receives double that of a female relative. If there are no residuaries, the asaba, but there's again leftover from step one, that the money is redistributed to the quota heirs, and this process is called al-rad. So it goes back. If everything is distributed, much is left behind, and there are no residuaries, there are no asaba, then the amount is redistributed among the quota heirs. If there are no quota heirs and no residuary heirs, then property is distributed to the extended family members. Okay. So still the person is not technically not a pure kalala, and there are extended family members who will receive. If there are no quota heirs, no residuary, and no extended heirs, then the property goes to the state or the Baitul Mal. And we don't have a Baitul Mal in Pakistan or in America. So the property better get distributed among these three tiers, like we studied. Now, rules of inclusion or exclusion in inheritance. In Islamic law, only relatives of legitimate blood relationship, thus illegitimate children and adopted children, have no shares in inheritance under the Islamic law. One can make a will in favor of an adopted child, or one can, gift to the adopted child, but the adopted child and illegitimate child does not have any share in inheritance. A full brother will exclude a half brother. So if there are full brothers, the half brothers will, who share a same father, but not a half brother who shares a common mother. So if two brothers have the same father and a different mother, then the half brother is not entitled. But if they have the same mother, then they are to be treated equally. In cases where a deceased man leaves a pregnant woman, the unborn child's share will be reserved. And as Quran says, that you keep testing them, and then you give them their due shares when they reach an age of maturity. Also, a woman during the time of waiting, idda, after divorce, is considered a wife of the deceased for purposes of inheritance. So, if a woman is in idda, she is a legal heir to her husband. Now, ending here, I'm sure that I have thoroughly confused you, as confused as I was. And I went over these orders again and again and again, and saw the different, there are at least three different schools of thought. And I hope and I pray that I have elaborated on all three in front of you. Now, this is an interesting fact that, I found. The Islamic law of inheritance has served as an impetus behind the development of algebra, which comes from Arabic al-Jabr, by Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, and other medieval Islamic mathematicians. Al-Khwarizmi, Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala. Jabr wal-Muqabala is algebra, actually. The foundational text of algebra. This is a book uh, devoted its third and longest chapter to solving problems related to Islamic inheritance using algebra. He formulated the rules of inheritance as linear equations, hence, his knowledge of quadratic equations was not required. And it was a fascinating fact, it was a fascinating pearl that I found. An even more fascinating pearl that I found was the famous Fibonacci sequence as we know it, and it is said that this sequence is used by Leonardo da Vinci and by Fibonacci and this. Here is a quote from one of the books that I reviewed. It's a well-known book. At this point, it would be well to make a few remarks about Fibonacci's fractions. The first thing to note is the format, one half, one fourth, which means, or four and a half. The format is unique to Andalusia, which is the modern day Spain, and the Maghrib, which is, like it says, the West, and reflects the Arabic method of writing from right to left. Something Fibonacci most probably learned as a student in a Muslim school in Bourges. This is the original text of Fibonacci, his book, and it has many pointers to the fact that the famous, he is known as the one who brought numbers to Europe. Now, in all honesty, numbers were brought to Europe by Muslims. And the most, I think the most research and the most amount of hard work done in mathematics by Muslims is for the law of inheritance. So these are fascinating facts that I found, and although they're not part of the session or part of the objectives, I thought that I will share them here, sort of to put our minds a little at ease. I think this is where I finish. And I'm going to go to the questions if there are any. All right. Is there a property threshold for exhaustion? How much is to be distributed to quota heirs? Like I said, I gave you the principles of distribution. If the quota heirs are satisfied, then come the asaba, the family that I read in front of you. The asaba, the amount is distributed among the asaba, and whatever is left over goes back to the quota heirs. So the quota heirs are basically, they are the key recipients. No matter how we play with it, the quota heirs are the main recipients of what is left behind. After the will is completed and after the loans are paid. So the quota heirs better make sure that, if there is an elder in the family, that they have no loans. And this is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that the quota heirs are being selfish. I think this is sort of the law is not like it is to be executed as soon as one dies. I think the law of inheritance in itself is actually a law of the entire life. It teaches you a code of life. It teaches you how to live a fulfilling and a beautiful life, so that in the end you leave the world satisfied and content, and those who love you are provided for. So it means apart from obvious or mandatory, any other issues should be mentioned in the will. This is very complicated. Yes. So when one is writing a will, the way to write a will is to write all the material assets. And the way to begin the will actually is to write, like, so I want my children to be Muslims after I die, and I want my children to practice Islam, and I want my heirs to learn Quran. So that is the first part of the will, which is not about the wealth. It is about all the good things that you want to leave for your heirs. And if you go over the wills of famous prophets like Abraham and Jacob, and Isaac in the Quran, they are known to have said, "Who are you going to worship after me?" That is the one question that is recorded in the Quran. So it is actually to take care of all aspects. Then also to take care of aspects that the person who is dying does not want to take anything on his conscience. So he or she can then write that I forgive this, I forgive this, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive everyone. I don't want to take my grudges to my grave. So that is the second part of the will. The first part is to tell your heirs to stay on Islam, to stay attached to the Quran, to stay attached to the Sunnah of the Prophet. The next part is to announce a pardon, and to seek pardon. The second part of the will must say that I forgive such and such, and I seek forgiveness from such and such, and I seek forgiveness for any unfairness that I may have committed knowingly or unknowingly. And then finally comes the part about material distribution of assets. And that is, I mean, you can, like I said, and I agree now, although I don't agree with the fact that the rule of one third applies to every will, but I think that since the muftis and the scholars are giving a ruling for the entire population, they have, in order to stay safe, and in order to not allow somebody to commit a corruption or to commit rights violation, they have said that the will can only be made in one third of the estate, and also not in favor of heirs, not in favor of legal heirs. But that does not stop a person from gifting in their life. I know of elders, and I have an elder like that for myself, Alhamdulillah, who has bequeathed everything in his life. He just, mashallah, he's alive and he has distributed everything. And that, I think that sense of peace and sense of fulfillment is priceless. That comes after making these major decisions in life. So if there are any more questions, I am right here, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. If not, then, but this test is going to be a tough test. It's not going to be an easy test. And if there are no more questions, thank you so much. And I will invite Sarah to give her closing remarks. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording now.